Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. My name is Hitzir,
I'm Hardy.
I'm Isa.
and this week we're glad to be back to talk about FX's gripping Cold War spy thriller, The Americans. Through 5 seasons of this show, this journey of KGB agents posing as a suburban American family grew to become not just a phenomenally thrilling and also accurate depiction of spycraft, but in general, one of the best family dramas of the prestige TV era. I'm excited to talk about this because this has been one of my favorite shows and one of the more underrated shows from the quote unquote golden age of TV, aka the peak TV era, when shows like Mad Men and Breaking Bad and stuff like that were all around.
Yeah.
I thought the Americans kind of slipped under the radar. I thought Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys should have gotten, Emmys for their work here. So did the writing team, so did the directing team. And just one of the unheralded gems in an era where there was so much TV to watch that even a show as good as The Americans couldn't get your attention. So, now with all that's going on with, Russia in the world again, I figured now it's a good time to again talk about The Americans. Did either of you catch The Americans when it was currently airing, as opposed to, now that it's on Disney Plus and you can binge it?
Yeah, I caught it firsthand when it first came out because I always like all this spycraft stuff.
Yep,
So
yep.
when it first came out, back in what's the year that it came out?
2013?
2013. Yeah. I still remember
Yeah.
I just graduated, looking for a job, and like the Americans were like this, like come home and watch kind of TV that time lah. I think it was on FX, is it?
It was on FX, yes.
Yeah.
Currently on Hulu / Disney Plus, but we were watching it on FX back in the day.
Yeah. So that's how I remember that, because FX was churning out like beauties, right? Back then.
Oh yeah. Atlanta, The Shield, like lots of great stuff on FX.
So because of that kind of reputation, I was like, okay, this is a cool show. And the first episode got me hooked already.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What about you, Isa? Did you watch it through the first 5 seasons?
No, I did not. I only caught like the couple of episodes when it debuted. I think it was because Hardy recommended it to me.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Right.
But like because I didn't quite have like access to FX, it was something that I caught like maybe the first 3 episodes and then it kind of dropped off for me. So I'm glad to have finally caught up after so many years.
Yeah. It used to be that DVDs were the second life of shows. Like The Wire, for example, famously only became popular once the DVD box sets were out and people were able to binge it. Nobody watched it live. Now in the streaming era is the new. Lots of shows like The Americans, I think Justified and stuff like that are getting a new lease on life because they're now streaming on Disney Plus and getting a wider audience because of it.
Yeah.
I'm just sad that The Americans can't be renewed lah. I mean, weirdly enough, like Justified is getting another season now,
really?
because there's been such a great they have good ratings on Disney Plus and Hulu, so they're like, let's make a new Justified, and I'm down for that too lah. So there's a new Justified coming next year. I'm not sure how Justified plays in the era of lots of police shootings.
Yeah.
Is it cool anymore? But that could be part of the story, you see. Like, so
I mean, Justified has that one thing going for it, was where it was set in. Yeah, which kind of okay with police shootings. I'm sorry.
I know, and like Raylan didn't really shoot any black people,
didn't.
so I
He
think it was
didn't.
cool.
It was
Yeah,
mostly
He
white
just hit,
criminals that he shot.
the first guy he shot on the show was a white supremacist.
Exactly.
So, Boyd Crowder, like, famously.
Yep.
But yeah, we're getting sidetracked with other FX shows. Justified is great though. You guys should watch it. Anyways, before we begin this episode and our discussion on The Americans, I recently signed up to a new streaming service called MUBI, and I got to tell you guys about it.
Okay.
I think in this day and age, right, there's no getting around it. There are a ton of streaming services out there. In fact, one could say there are too many. There are all the niche streamers. There's Roku and Fire TV and all of that, and then there are the majors. Your Amazons, your Netflixes, your Hulus, your Disney Pluses, your Apple TV. There's so much content to watch that I was like, do I really need another streaming service in my life? And then I found out about MUBI, and the MUBI streaming service came into play. And if you've never heard of the service before, well, you're in for a real treat. Everything from their collection of movies. It's expensive, but it's not overwhelming. And the thing that makes MUBI different from your Netflix or your Amazon or your Hulu is that its library seems to be catered more towards art house cinema. It is a streaming platform that feels more like a film community than a collection of movies generated by an algorithm. They have a big collection of classic cult and art house titles, and it makes the platform a must for cinephiles like us or those who just want a curated list of some of the best movies out there. You know, on streaming platforms, like when you're looking for the best movies on Netflix, you will find kind of libraries that are catered towards everyone. Like if you want to find sitcoms, you can find it. If you want to find cheesy Michael Bay films, you can find it. But movie on the other hand, right, takes a more specialized approach to its film curation and offers the best that the world of cinema has to offer. Oftentimes underrated or underseen films, stuff that you go to out of your way to go to the projector to find, and stuff that won't be available on your larger streaming services. And he has all this to offer while also introducing its subscribers to lots of hidden gems and forgotten classics from all around the world, from Africa to France and everywhere in between. This just because it's curated the MUBI, it doesn't mean that MUBI doesn't encourage exploration. Quite the contrary. Like when I first signed up to the service, I started browsing various categories, and I found video essays by some of the editors, their in-house editors, and it introduced me to 3 hours of watching different stuff from Sweden to Poland to Finland and stuff that I've never heard of from the 40s and 50s and 60s, and how a lot of these films tend to be overshadowed, I guess, by some of the larger Hollywood fare that we are inundated with these days. And one of the coolest features on MUBI is also their Film of the Day section, which introduces a new title to the streaming library every day of the week. And the new editions range from movies released within the past couple of years to those going back decades and more than half a century in some cases. Each of these movies come with descriptions, trailers, information on the cast and crew, and articles. Like they actually have editorials about the film's significance and other commentary, and that's what sets it apart from your Netflix or your Amazon or your Hulu
that
or your
actually
Disney
sounds
Plus.
super useful.
Yes, right. You don't have to look up your wiki or the IMDb or whatever, or look up external sites for analysis on the themes of these films. It's all provided in house, and the experience is even better when you imagine movie like some sort of art house theater that is right within your home. It has this very vast library. Like I said, classic cult and art house films. There's documentaries, lots to catch up on. So I would definitely encourage you to sign up to MUBI. There's a lot of good stuff happening on MUBI right now, especially currently in the month of August, right? It's a kind of a special month for us in Southeast Asia. Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia are all respectively celebrating the national days in the month of August. So MUBI thought that it would be kind of the perfect time to put together a collection of movies that embody the spirit of Asian independence. And that's where I would like to kind of shout out MUBI's wonderfully curated Viva Nusantara campaign, which cherry picks 10 fantastic films that reflect kind of the ideas of strength, unity, and bravery within an Asian context. So if you want to check more about the Viva Nusantara campaign out, you can go to the MUBI website itself, or you can read my article on Popwire, where I talk about all 10 of the films that were curated for Viva Nusantara. There is stuff like Salam Bombay from India. There's stuff from Singapore, like I Want to Go Home. A film called Manila from the Philippines was a favorite of mine. Ashes of Time, Redux, Wong Kar-wai's Wuxia Epic that remains kind of underseen is on there as well. Of course, you can't do like a list like this without like at least one mainstream title. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Gandhi is it. If you want to talk about independence, Gandhi is the film to
Yeah.
for
So we're talking
India.
about a classic Ben Kingsley film.
Yes, we're talking about the classic Ben Kingsley film, David Attenborough, and all of that. Yes, and we all have seen that. So yeah, go check out Viva Nusantara for their amazing collection of 10 films that celebrate Asian independence, and also go sign up to MUBI itself. There's a 30-day free trial. If you don't like it, you can just cancel at any time at no cost to you. So great stuff there.
Nice.
I don't know whether either of you have been familiar with MUBI prior to like me kind of shouting it out right now.
No, I mean this is my first time hearing about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, just I know this sounds weird, but could you spell MUBI?
MUBI.
Okay, yeah, just double checking on it.
MUBI.com. I'm not familiar. I think I've seen it around, but at the moment I'm just scrolling through the stuff that they have, and I'm already very impressed. Actually,
yeah, me too.
I love that they have all these like curated lists, and that has like a ton of stuff of film that I've always put somewhere I'm gonna watch, but
never really got around it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, MUBI in some ways is a little frustrating for a journalist like me because it is my job to curate collections from all these vast libraries, and just MUBI has taken it out of my hands, man. Like I'm out of a job because of MUBI. if other streaming services are doing this, I think I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah,
I can work for MUBI.
That's true, guys. Yeah, we can all work for MUBI. And speaking of which, MUBI actually has their own podcast too. So
nice.
Yeah, they're putting us people like us out of business.
That's fine.
But anyways, yeah, go check out for MUBI. It's cheap and it has a great collection of films there.
Okay.
Anyways, let's jump into our main topic right now. The Americans, as we've been talking about. So what is the Americans? Let me pitch it to you. It follows Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, played by Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell, respectively. They are a prototypical American couple living in the suburbs of Virginia who, on the surface, appear perfectly normal. Their most exciting attribute happens to be that they live next door to a very seemingly bland FBI agent, Stan Beeman, played by the wonderful Noah Emmerich, along with the fact that they're actually, in secret, covert Soviet spies living deep undercover in the United States for the last 15 years in order to turn the balance of the Cold War in their favor. No one in their ordinary life, not even their young kids, their biological children, Paige and Henry, even they don't have the slightest inkling that their parents are KGB spies, By day, they are managers of a modest travel agency. This takes place in 1980s. The travel agencies were a thing back then. There was no Klook or whatever. And the Jennings kind of spend every minute of their free time embarking on various spy missions to infiltrate their chosen marks, gather information, occasionally kidnap or even assassinate a target of extreme political importance. Like many other brilliant shows on the peak TV era or that are currently on the air, the tension that derives from the show feels like a slow motion car crash. Seeing how much our protagonists will compromise their morals. The Americans really puts the screws on Elizabeth, who's kind of the true blue patriot of the two, whereas Philip is far more of the reluctant secret agent between them, sort of kind of buying into American idealism at the longer that he lives there. But the show's secret weapon is how their initial attempts to coldly work together for the cause of Mother Russia eventually give way, opening up the story into one about spycraft, yes, while also transforming their work marriage, their assigned marriage, which was largely loveless in the beginning, into something that kind of resembles a true marriage of romance and that's full of meaning, let's begin with Hardy, who has caught the show from way back in the beginning. What do you think makes the Americans so special through its 5 seasons?
I think how they seamlessly blend two very distinct storylines. The KGB storyline, right? The spycraft and all that stuff. And honestly, a family drama on the other side. And and how those two like totally separate things, because they keep their lives separate and all that. Slowly how it collides by the end of the series, And I think this was beautifully done throughout the entire 5 seasons. And that struggle, you could really see how they struggled to maintain that home life, where they try to raise their children right. They try to it's so weird because how they have to instill some American values into their kids.
So that they're believable, right? Their children are believable.
Exactly, but at the same time, they despise capitalism. Like especially Elizabeth, right?
Religion as well, other aspects of
Yeah,
American culture.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then how they have to, but how they still find a compromise. Like, how they find the compromises, how they find solutions to very unique situations. That's
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things that really like hooked me in, lah. There was
Yep.
never an easy answer most of the time.
Yeah.
Every
Mm.
problem had you had to compromise or you had to sacrifice something, either yourself or even someone. You know,
Yep.
no mission because the missions that they were given were very first of all difficult.
Yep.
There's nothing easy. It was always infiltration. It was always uh all this spycraft of such high levels and all that, that you could see that humanity like slowly being stripped away,
Yeah.
especially in the main characters, especially with Philip. By the
Mm-hmm.
time the fourth season comes around and all that, he's such a changed character from when we
Yep.
saw him at the beginning, that kind of thing. And it's true for people like Stan, who sees like who becomes more and more paranoid because all the everything that he tries always turns to shit.
Yeah.
The new Hank Schrader.
Yeah, honestly, like he was being counted on every single level. That until I mean, we can talk about it later. But like Stan's character also
Yep.
goes through this beautiful like beautiful arc lah. So
Yeah.
that was something. All this, yeah, it was a very character driven show that really caught my attention because everybody had beautiful arcs, even like minor characters also. Like Nina, like Oleg
Mm.
in later on. Yeah,
Mm.
even to like the secretary
Martha.
Martha, yeah, who
Yeah.
had a really really strong arc.
Yeah. Is it Martha or Margaret? I keep forgetting.
Martha Hansen.
Martha.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Boy, yeah. What a great character too, man.
Yep.
Martha, honestly, throughout the entire show is the character I felt the worst
Me too.
for.
Yeah, I felt so
Yeah.
sad for her.
I was like not invested in her at all, but I continually felt bad for her.
Same.
Right up to the end. What about you, Isa? Now that you're fully caught up with the Americans, what do you think about the show in general?
Oh man, I think I did have the benefit of binging it, right?
Mm.
And the main kind of draw for me, kind of from the onset, is that The Americans is just a masterclass in pacing and tension holding, right? Much like Hardy has already mentioned, right? Like you have kind of have these two somewhat distinct genres that they're trying to merge here at the same time, right? And there's just so much going on at any given point in time, you know.
Yep.
And I think the showrunners did a fantastic job of like making sure that you keep all of those balls up in the air at the same time, right? And giving them just enough attention for it to be present somewhere in the back of your mind as you're watching the show, right? Knowing that it could possibly drop off at any one point in time, despite the fact that what's on screen, what's happening in the moment, might be a
Yeah.
totally different ball, right?
Yeah.
And like to be able to do that for one season is an achievement. To be able to do that consistently over 6 seasons is insane.
Yep.
So I really, really enjoyed that part of it, right? Like it's one of those shows that's very hard to stop binging
Yep.
because like it always ends on a note that promises more the next episode, right? And then
Yep.
of course you get even bigger cliffhangers from season to season. So like that was a big, big draw for me, right? It's very hard to kind of like remove yourself, which is why like I essentially binge all of the seasons like in a matter of weeks, you know, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
which is kind of that. So I can't speak to how it felt like to wait for this week to week. I think it would have been one of those shows that I would be constantly kind of like obsessing over just because like, you know, it's on my mind until the next episode comes out. But that was a big part of my enjoyment for it. Also just the attention to detail when it came to character building, and having such a great kind of like, I mean, 6 seasons is a long runway for you to craft your characters, you know. But from the onset, the characters were already interesting, at least the main ones. And then that sort of evolved into this very high amount of investment, emotional investment from my end, just to see what happens to them. Whether or not I
Yes.
agreed with what they did, whether or not I liked them as people, was not as important as like finding out what happened to them and how the story resolved and what ball eventually drops, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were the like main kind of points for me for the Americans.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you guys have just said, lah. But one thing that really stuck out to me and made it different for a spy show, in my opinion, was that it totally changed the game. In terms of depicting spycraft in fictional media.
Mm.
When you think about spy movies, you think about James Bond, the Bourne Identity, the Mission Impossible franchise, which are all great franchises. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy them a lot, And then on TV, back in the day, you had like, the Avengers. I'm not talking about, Marvel's Avengers. I'm talking about, the British Avengers.
Yeah.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Get Smart. Modern day, we have stuff like Blind Spot or Blacklist or the most, unbelievable of them all, 24. All of these are shows that I enjoy. Like, don't get me wrong, these shows are happy to offer only the thrills and suspense that are inherent to the genre, you know. But this feels like a new breed of show that actually accurately depicted the process of spycraft. You talked about the character development, which is correct, the action, which is really good, the acting, which is really good. Joe Weisberg, who creates the show, has a peculiar knack for dropping unusual 80s hits into the show. It's stuff that like other shows like Stranger Things would pick like more popular songs, and they will pick like kind of hidden gems for it. I love all of that, but the thing I loved the most was its attention to detail with the spycraft. We've never seen spycraft done this accurately and this meticulously before. Like, what was it like to really be a spy back in the 80s during the Cold War? There are all these reaction channels, like GQ famously does this, Doctor reacts to Grey's Anatomy or whatever, right? And they got a genuine CIA counterintelligence guy to watch the Americans, and he essentially said that like, I can't find really any flaws in this. Are some aspects embellished? Yeah, but these were the actual techniques. These were the actual things that spies used to do back in the day. Do classified ads, the wigs, the dead drops, stuff like that. It was all, for the most part, very, very accurate. This show played to me. I was watching this along the same time as 24 and Homeland. And you can just imagine how different the Americans is from Homeland or 24 or Blacklist. They are very, very different shows. The others feel almost cartoonish compared to the Americans. Did you guys get the feeling as well? What about you, Isa?
For sure. I mean, much like Hadi and yourself, like spycraft is something I've been interested in since I was a kid. Like I used to go to the library and borrow books about, spycraft, about dead drops, about these like hidden recording devices that they used to use and all of that. So watching the Americans, it's like feeding the child inside of me. It's like, oh, I get to see like all these like things and how they actually work instead of like just like a theoretical understanding of them that I read from a book, right? And it's kind of insane just how much there is to remember at any given point in time, right? Whether it's from the fact that when they have a phone call, everything that they say is kind of like coded because you never know who's listening. The dead drops are sure and all of that, but just like it's the social engineering part that blows me away, right? We two people essentially we see who are masters of their craft in just finding the ways to manipulate people and get what they want, right? And very often time it's like 1 degree or 2 degrees points of separation from the actual source of the information itself. So it makes that like extremely clever. I mean, I was reading that Joe Weisberg was a CIA agent, and that's like kind of like where he's drawing a lot of like his understanding of the spycraft from. So like as far as we know, it's legit, right? If there's only one thing, like to me at the beginning, I was just like, that isn't really that great of a disguise, right? But as time went on, and then you start to realize that we don't actually pay that much attention to how a person look exactly. So every time like a sketch came in, right, and I look at the sketch as like, you know what? Honestly, I would have believed that sketch was what we saw, as opposed to like what me as an audience member saw on the screen, right? It's like that's totally believable because you're only going to focus on their hair, what they were wearing, and all of that. And
Glasses,
glasses,
mustache, things that could be faked,
yeah, and like it blew my mind. Like in that moment, right? I was just like, oh no, but I totally know it's still Matthew Rice, or it's still um
Kerry Russell.
yeah, Gary Russell in the in disguise. But like honestly, like it totally worked. And that was something that as the seasons went along, I was just like, yeah, these two in particular are insanely talented at what they're doing,
Mm,
right? Even like little things like what you're wearing in the event that you need to kind of like run away
Yeah.
mid operation, right? Like wear a colorful jacket that you can toss later on,
yep.
change your hat, and all of that kind of stuff. It's just like, wow. Oh, that really scratched an itch for me
Yep.
when it came to that. Like just the amount of it and the execution of it that is so lovingly kind of like displayed and
Mm.
performed. Wow, that really hit the spot.
Yeah, yeah. I found like a lot of the criticisms with the Americans tend to have to do with its pacing or its process orientation.
Mm.
Similar criticisms, have been levied at like Better Call Saul, for
Yeah.
example, because they spend inordinate amount of time showing you what needs to be done
Yeah.
and how to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think people who are not into process and would rather get straight into the frills and the action and all of that might find the show boring. Hadi, did you get the impression? Were you bored by like the spycraft elements of it or the process of it, or did you dig it as much as the two of us did?
Oh man. Okay. First of all, I'm a huge like Robert Ludlum fan.
Yeah, yeah, right. I,
Okay.
I know that about you. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I mean the books, right? So I read all his books and all that. So spy stuff and all that, number one. And like so I always knew what I mean from all the books that I read from Ludlum and all that, even though it's exaggerated and all that, spycraft was something that he really like seriously does very well. And when
Mm,
I saw this being done in real life, like how Born Identity totally destroyed what Ludlum created, like with all the choppy cam and all that bullshit, right?
Mhm.
mm,
Like to see that beauty of the spycraft being done so elegantly,
Mm.
with the
yep.
changing of the cars, the marking of the mail, the what the mail
The
bins and all
mailboxes,
that, the
yeah. Mm.
mailboxes, like
Mm-hmm.
and like the sleight of hand required to like pass notes and all that stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so it's a drama in itself.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, so no, I was not bored. 100%, I was into it. That got me, and I mean, but I think one of the things that also got my heart racing was how close the FBI got
Oh
all the
man,
time. Like they were
yeah,
just 2 steps away,
yeah.
Yeah.
almost all the time, and it was just amazing at how close they got to the Jennings. You know?
Yeah, yeah. That's what great. I think at the end of the day, right, something about spycraft or cat and mouse games with criminals and stuff like that. It's all about the tension, like the cat
Yeah,
and mouse chase.
Yeah.
exactly.
And what is important with shows like this, I could say the same about Breaking
Mhm.
Bad. I could say the same about Justified or whatever, right? It's that your protagonists and your antagonists need to be equally competent.
Yes.
And this is where like your favorite character Stan Beeman comes in,
Mhm.
Hardy. Um, it, Stan Beeman could easily have been made out to be incompetent or not good at his job or got problems or whatever. The issue with that phase Philip and Elizabeth was not that he lived next door, but that Stan Beeman was as good as they were.
Yep.
He is an equally skilled counterintelligence operative, as skilled as Philip and Elizabeth were, and he was so close to them so many times in a way that Hank Schrader was competent and was so close to Walter White all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
In the way that like what we recently saw with like Lalo versus Gus on Better Call Saul,
Yes.
like two people are like on equal levels, like titans of the game,
Mm.
fighting each other. And that was really great too. The show also offered I think sneakily offered like some good education into the geopolitics of the 1980s.
Yeah.
And it's not just US versus Russia.
Nope.
It is USSR allies, what was happening over in Afghanistan, what was happening in Africa, in Latin America.
Yep.
There was even an episode focusing about um, uh, Jewish Russians, trying to find asylum in Israel
Mhm.
and things like that. These were all like quite elegant edutainment pieces
Mm.
that didn't feel like it was beating you over the head with a lesson.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I think the show is kind of focused on like a very elaborate complex morality play. The show is focused on doing what is right or what someone believes to be right.
Correct. Yeah.
Patriotism and honor to country, is it paramount over all else? At times, that ideology circumvented over what was morally good, leading to some miserable murders that haunted Philip.
Yeah.
Infinitely more than it faced Elizabeth, who kind of shrugged it off most of the time. Philip, I mean, for the most part, he kind of sometimes the way that he wears the weight of what he's been doing.
Yeah.
He did stares into space. Sometimes his outbursts at his children were horrific and a reminder of the horrors of his work and how those horrors wear itself on you, you know, wears you down to a nub, you know, sacrificing his core well past to the bone, you know. Reese plays these scenes
He
beautifully.
does.
A subtlety to even a herald glance to his partner in crime, you know, saying more than any word could. Philip's resolve was a question that plagued most of the first season, leaving him to be far more bottled up and emotionless in the middle seasons before learning to open up and eventually let go of that life for good at the end of the fifth season. So it was a very, very beautifully crafted character arc for him. Everything Matthew Reese dies, I think. I think Kerry Russell gets most of the attention, and she should.
Yeah.
But Matthew Reese is a bit underrated too in the show.
Agreed.
One particular scene where he was screaming at Paige for over the Bible. I don't know whether you guys remember this.
Yeah.
You fear God, you should fear me. You know,
Wow, that was so scary.
That was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Oh man, but like on the flip side, you know, you got like that Elizabeth's icy demeanor. You know, she has this like endless determination.
Yeah.
And that the show found its kind of second way into that perspective. We didn't get this perspective from Philip, and we got that from Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She never flinches. She never looks away from any work that the center would ask of her, leaving her sometimes a vulnerable monster who only gave small hints of humanity. But Russell would hold it back and play it like a burden rather than a trait. Beeman and the FBI were always on the cusp of catching them, or on the cusp of something bigger, something at times that felt like it was on the fringes of, for most of the series run, right? Always like on the edge of the Jennings' vision. He was always on the periphery. The early goings were closing in on what was dubbed the couple, right? There's this sketch renditions of Philip and Elizabeth in disguise, while also investigating the inner workings at the Residentura, the Russian embassy. Nina Krivlova, a KGB officer working out the Residentura, was part of this. Oleg Burov was part of this, head of technology and science and intelligence for the KGB when we first meet him, who grew from secondary character to a large and important figure in the end game of the series.
Exactly.
There's also the issue of Stan's partner being murdered by Philip in season 1. For catching him at Marfa's, you know, and that's left in the air for many seasons. The leads and efforts of the FBI led down avenues that could be frustrating due to their dead ends or the labyrinth manner that at times felt like they were not going anywhere. But that was because sometimes that's how investigations go. It felt very real in that way. Not everything can be uncovered at a drop of the hat or solved at the end of the episode like Law and Order. And when looking back on it, this is a commendable move on the part of the writers, you know. And I haven't even talked about the Jennings children, but we'll save that for later. You know? I kind of run down some of the primary players outside of the Jennings children. Let's begin with you, Isa. You know, like who are some of the primary or secondary characters that stood out to you, and why do you love them?
I was really interested in Nina's story at the beginning.
Oh man,
Nina's great.
Yeah, and I did think that it was nice of them to include later on in the story, right after she's kind of like deported back and in jail. Like I enjoyed that, but that felt a bit filler to me, right?
What?
Because one of in the sense that I really loved them exploring that story, but there were parts of her relationship with both Oleg and Stan that over time felt like it wasn't as it felt like it dropped off. You know what I mean? Like there's this scene later on in season 5, I think, where Oleg and Stan re-meet each other. Or that's season 6, and Oleg asked, "Oh, do you ever think about her anymore?" Right? And that was like kind of very telling because like at that point in time, there's so many things going on in their lives at that point, right? And Stan has a bit of like this bland look where he realizes that he actually hasn't really thought about Nina at all. And it was the same way for me, you know. But like Nina feels unique in this in the space of the series, much like Martha feels unique in the space of the series because they are both caught up, right? In the way, and while Nina makes decisions to further herself within this situation she finds herself in, Martha is the complete opposite. In that, like, eventually it catches up with her despite her finding out, and then like completely takes her out of the picture and into a kind of like a brand new life. So I think like those two in particular really kind of stand out to me, just because like it's one of those, they're collateral damage, right? Or at least it feels like they're collateral damage in kind of like the ongoing battle between these two superpowers. And you can see that in a very kind of like human and very personal way with how they actually end up.
Yep. What about you, Hadi? Like, you want to talk about Stan Beeman? You want to talk about Arcady?
I mean, Oleg was one of my favorite characters by the end of the
Oleg too.
series.
Yes, yeah.
Like that dude went through a awesome arc. Like when he first came on, you were like, this guy's a piece of shit, man.
He was kind of annoying.
Yeah, he was useless,
Yeah.
He was like a high because his father was in the Politburo and all that. Like therefore, he got like a cushy job in America.
A little bit of a white horse.
Yeah, exactly. And then so and we know that kind of people in Singapore, right, in our lives also. So like I was like, yeah, just because your dad is important, therefore you. But then he actually has certain values. He has certain like principles behind him, giving him that spine, lah. And that grows as the seasons go on, like especially in 4, 5, and 6. The whole Nina story, I mean, I really actually enjoyed that part, especially that relationship between Oleg and Stan. When they meet together, and Stan actually, because of Oleg's naivety, lah, Stan actually recorded him. And that backfires. I mean, not backfires, but that eventually comes to hit in the future seasons when Oleg goes back to Russia. However, Nina's, I mean, no spoilers here, right? I guess Nina's execution.
Yes, yeah.
Was one of the saddest moments of the series for me. Like, I mean, it was kind of, I guess she kind of didn't want to help the USSR anymore. At the point, I think she was supposed to get the info out of the scientists, right?
Yeah,
and then she did refuse to do it. Then therefore, bye, you're no more useful. You're not useful to us anymore. And just like that, she's disposed of, because of a trend, and because of a treasonous past, lah. However, like for Martha, her becoming, defecting to the USSR unwillingly, right? Is held to a higher regard. Like in the end, like she got to adopt a kid. That was the one thing that she actually wanted. She didn't want to be alone, and all that. And now she has a kid, lah. Like good for her, lah. The USSR actually really took care of her, lah. Which was sad, lah, to see that dichotomy between like Nina's fate and Martha's fate. This American, but I mean, she really helped Philip so much. Like if without her, a lot of the things wouldn't pass. They wouldn't have the information, lah, that they needed to. Another smaller character that I actually really enjoyed the arc of was Frank Gett.
Yeah.
The first FBI head lah of counterintelligence.
The boss lah, the boss.
The boss lah, yeah. And how like he got beaten up by Elizabeth in season 3 or something, right?
Well, I mean, everybody gets beaten up by Elizabeth at one time or another, lah. So like, I don't hold it against him. But yeah, I mean, Elizabeth is just she
Terminator,
Black Widow.
basically.
She just Black Widows people.
Yeah.
He's a beast.
Yeah.
She's the original Black Widow,
Yeah.
So but Frank Gett, he was again a man of principle, very competent. He knew how to pick the talent. Like he picked Stan because he knew what Stan could do. He picked all the agents that were very, even Amandor, who died eventually, right? Like Amandor also was a talented agent. Like all these guys, he surrounded himself with competent agents that would do their jobs well. It's just that the KGB guys were even just were hidden, lah. They couldn't see what was coming.
I mean, Stan. Even before the show, in the first episode, we heard that Stan was embedded in a white supremacy group for like 3 years. Like he's clearly a talented agent.
Exactly. The one other thing that I wanted to mention was, I mean, among all the characters, was the pastor.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
He's I mean, even though he might be an annoying character at times, because very preachy sometimes,
Mm.
and but I feel that his moral compass was so strong. I mean, he didn't even realize. I mean, he got a job in South America in the end, right?
Yeah.
Because
Argentina.
USSR,
Mm.
Yeah.
kind of like greased the wheels for that.
Yeah.
But I felt that he was lucky because Philip kind of made sure that nobody killed him, lah.
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically Elizabeth, but yeah.
So close. It was so close at times.
Right.
And finally, obviously, the two handlers.
Oh my god, I was just about to ask about that.
Yeah, the two
Character
handlers.
actress Margot Martindale.
Yes.
Character actress Marco Mandel, who has such a fantastic storied career. It's insane. The number of roles that she's played.
Also got beaten up by Elizabeth.
Also got beaten up by
Also.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Gabriel avoided that fate just because he's such a nice, sweet man.
Yeah,
at the end of
and
the day.
he got them first. So
Yeah.
he bred them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the differences between the handlers was a very kind of like interesting
Yes.
relationship dynamic to kind of see, right? Like especially with Elizabeth's kind of like I guess mommy issues with Julia and Philip's kind of like issues with Gabriel as well.
Mhm.
Like those were some of like very, very tense moments that felt high stake, but they all take place like in a dining room, while they're sitting down over tea and cookies. And it's insane how well acted and how nuanced those scenes were.
Mhm.
And some of my favorite parts, very honestly. I was so sad to see Gabriel go.
But
But at the same time, it made sense both in terms of the story and in terms of like where the narrative was at, that you need to bring back Julia to like totally like fuck shit up.
Yeah.
Oh my god, so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
I mean,
you
not Julia,
remember-
Claudia.
Claudia. Yeah.
Sorry, but this is just a side note, okay?
Mhm.
Fast one.
Yeah.
Do you remember there was this one handler that was handling another family?
Yes, yeah, the family that got killed.
Right,
yeah.
right. And then we found out that why actually it was the son that killed everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And remember that handler is in For All Mankind, right? Is basically the head of NASA.
Margot, yeah.
Margot, right?
Yeah. I told you everyone from For All Mankind is from the American.
Exactly.
I mean, Arcady is a cosmonaut there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's insane. So that's again side note. But one of the things that I actually really enjoyed, right, is that the fog of war is real.
Yeah.
The one thing is that the top ranks of the USSR, the Politburo, the head of the center, people we don't see at all.
Yeah.
They have this. They always have weird or like mistranslations or something, like they always have the wrong information in terms of like what the Americans are trying to plan, and you have Philip having to correct them all the time. Therefore, his information coming in is so crucial. Like when Ronald Reagan was shot,
Yeah.
and the whole and the KGB. I mean, the KGB was thinking that there was going to be a coup, because of the way that one of the generals spoke and one of the senators spoke.
Yes.
And they didn't understand the nuance of American politics. Therefore, having this weird thing, because they thought it was like USSR politics, where there's going to be a purge, they're gonna, there's a coup, the generals are going to take over, that kind of thing. And then Philip had to like quickly get the information over, like, dude, relax, Reagan's still alive, everything's fine,
This is where Philip's immersion into American culture comes in handy for them.
Yeah. And then so this kind of things, like, it was lucky that you had like illegals there to like give you the correct information on what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, spycraft is essentially a game of phone, right?
Yes.
And the message gets more diluted the further up the flagpole that you go.
Yeah.
It's also actually weirdly relatable. I think we all have worked under people like far up, right, who just doesn't know what's going on the ground.
Yeah.
And then they think they know, but actually we know better because we're actually on the ground and they don't want to listen to us.
Yeah.
It's frustrating in a way. It is obviously not relatable in this context,
No,
but
no, no.
also relatable in many contexts because we all have those
Shitty
super high
bosses.
ups, those shitty bosses, or I mean, when I was in police, all my bosses at the top were just university graduates who never done a patrol in their lives, and are trying to make new policies or rejiggering context of our workload and stuff like that, and they just have no idea what's going on. I think it's the same for every country, from America to the USSR to everywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. I'm glad that you brought up the pastor, Hadi, because let's talk about the Jennings children now, which is a huge point of division within the fan base and viewers of the Americans in general.
Yeah.
Paige and Henry are ostensibly Americans. They were born and raised knowing nothing of their parents and their hidden lives. They see the late night excursions. They see the stress their parents go through. But the excuse of a travel agency and mystery clients are always at the ready to fix any discrepancies that the children might think of.
Yep.
Henry is almost an afterthought for most of the series.
Yes.
He befriends Stan or at a friend's house and is kind of missing for stretches at the time. But as the final season looms, he becomes more prominent and it's actually used very effectively at the end there. They kind of fix the Henry problem right at the end. Paige, on the other hand, is a massive focus of the show. Massive since season 1. Her turn to religion, and in time, the revelation of the secret of her family and her piece by piece movement into the life of a spy is a fascinating development that I think no other show would have done. This shatters her perception of her parents and all of the lies over her entire life up to that point, and the slow shift into seeing the world differently and eventually becoming a part of that life felt very gradual, never forced. It felt very organic, that life, of course, will always have casualties. It was a near silent war that could be felt every season. Nina, for example, was a big casualty of it. But I think Paige didn't understand what she was getting into, but wanted to be part of something her parents, wanted to be closer to her parents, and this was the way that she could do it, right? So from the beginning, most people kind of hated Paige. I saw her as a whiny teen, got angst, obstacle to our protagonist, the parents. So she saw her as an annoying obstacle, And then Hadi, you kind of alluded to this a bit earlier as well. So I think I know where you stand on this. But what about you, Isa? How did you see Paige and her progression? Were you as frustrated with her as most viewers were? For the record, I was never. I always saw her as like, this is what a normal kid would do. They wrote her entirely perfectly. Like this is what any kid in that situation would do, I think. What about you, Isa? Like, what do you think about the whole Paige controversy, I guess?
I think I lean a little bit more towards how you feel hits because if I put myself in Paige's shoes, right, I totally understand. You are a smart kid, you're observant, right? Something doesn't add up somewhere. And like with everything that's going on in a teen's like mind and body, right? Like for you to act out in that way is totally understandable. And like given how brilliant Paige is played, and of course later on, like as she transitions into the craft of it itself, right, you get to see so many moments of that. Like I totally understand why that was. I think also it was less annoying for me because I watched everything at one go. Right. So like her, to me at least as an audience member, her growth rate is definitely not as long drawn as if you were watching this kind of like week to week. So I didn't feel it as badly or as intensely, I guess. But certainly Paige is one of my favorite parts of the show, right? Like I think the moment she's told what is going on, or whether or not you want to say like she kind of like figured it out, like that point in time, like Paige becomes one of the most important like chess pieces on the board. And I was most interested in finding out what happens to Paige, right? Because that is the main complication. That is the main wrench. This is a part of two halves of your life that you can no longer separate and becomes even more complicated. That is a source of conflict and drama and heartbreak that you cannot ignore. And that was like why like the shift towards or rather the prominence of Paige within the narrative became so much more interesting to me.
What about you, Hadi? What do you think?
I mean, my first viewing of the series, definitely she annoyed the hell out of me because again, I just wanted my protagonist to get through this. Like, come on, we have enough problems. But the thing is, again, when you put it like what Isa said, you have to be in her shoes and all that. You realize, okay, there's a lot of things wrong here. Okay, my parents are not around all the time. I'm basically like running the damn house. I'm doing all the cleaning. I have to raise this irritating brother of mine. Like there's so many. I'm struggling with this newfound religion that I'm into. Like there's so and teenage angst also lah. She was going through all this, while her body is changing, her and puberty is happening at the same time.
Yeah, the normal teenage stuff is happening too, alongside the abnormal stuff.
Exactly. So for her to be crazy is understandable, especially on my second viewing, which is a lot more recent, where I see there's more sympathy towards Paige at the beginning, and then the understanding of how beautiful her arc is as well. Like how she saw religion as a very dogmatic way, a very black and white and all that stuff, and slowly it becomes grayer as the episodes go by, until when she basically finds the journal.
Oh yeah.
And that just blows her mind, and like she becomes totally disillusioned with religion. She still wants to do something that is she still wants to leave an impact on the world, and therefore her mother really manipulated the situation so well. Elizabeth is the greatest manipulator in the world. Like how she got Paige from knowing that they're Russians to becoming an active KGB agent. Beautifully done.
Yes. I mean, Elizabeth is a great spy lah. I mean, she's great at her work. It makes her a bad mother sometimes, but also a good spy. And I think Paige's descent into the world of spies turned out to be, a surprisingly tumultuous and confusing one, and very interesting viewing lah. She's making rookie mistakes and facing backlash from Elizabeth in the process. She ended up seeing her mother covered in the brains of an army general, leading Philip to say, well, now she's seen everything. And her mixing of intelligence and a relationship with an intern of a senator led Elizabeth to chastise her. But when finding out that her mother is doing the same thing and ruining the life of a young man, their kind of closeness and relationship is left in tatters. And it's the kind of thing that I enjoy watching, there are a lot of victims in the show like that I feel more sympathy for now upon second viewing than I did at first. For example, I didn't really feel that bad about. I mean, it's hard to say but I think I was younger and I didn't care. I feel infinitely worse for Nina and her character arc, like you were saying. I realized that the reason she got into trouble was of her own making, but from the officer to becoming a double agent and then to be sent to prison in Russia and then being killed, it was a process that continually gave you a possibility of hope that she could get out of it, and then it was dashed in a moment. She felt very important in those early seasons. Another prominent casualty that I like to talk about in an emotional sense is Martha Hansen, the secretary in the FBI's counterintelligence program. Her fate and her arc almost feels incomprehensibly cruel, almost comically cruel sometimes, in how she was tricked into marrying one of Philip's aliases, the wig-adorned Clark, forced to spy on her boss and colleagues. And for multiple seasons, she was oblivious to the goings-on, just curious about instances of his fake job, but open and welcoming to them until the truth is revealed. Her shipping off to Russia, a foreign land she knows nothing of, and having to acclimatize is a punishment her character kind of never deserved. Though season 5 kind of ends on a glimmer of hope for her, like you said, she adopted a child, something she always wanted. So that was nice, I guess. But these are only like a few of the lives that were ruined by the characters in the Americans. Sorry, go ahead.
There's one side character that we haven't talked about.
Who?
The male robot.
Oh yeah! Oh my god! The male robot actually became like a meme during like live endings. Yeah,
it did. Like that was one of the things I always loved, was that the male robot got its own like fandom. Like, I mean, it was bugged in the end. Remember?
The writers actually said that they only made the male robot. They did the bug plot for the male robot because they realized there was a fandom growing around the male robot.
Exactly. So yeah, the male robot was one of those like it got abused by Frank when Frank was pissed, you know.
Yeah.
And then yeah, again, it showed like how insidious the KGB were. Like there's so many. Like, the Martha was infiltrated. The male robot was infiltrated. The computers were infiltrated. Like
Mm.
like Stan didn't like when Stan looked back, right? He realized that there was no way they was going to win. Like everything was
Yeah.
was compromised, you
Yeah.
know, and it was insane, lah. Like yeah, so yeah. Anyway, male robot was one of my favorites, also side characters.
I want to talk about like a side character that was
Had more words.
probably to me the most uncomfortable thing to watch on the Americans, which is saying something because
Oh,
there's a lot of uncomfortable things to
uh-huh.
watch. The Kimmy subplot.
Oh god.
Oh yeah,
As you
that
know,
was so uncomfortable.
that you know Philip is faced with this moral dilemma at Elizabeth's request. I might add, you
Mhm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
to not only seduce or befriend a girl who's clearly underage, but to also in the end plant drugs on her and use the threat of prison to blackmail her father,
Mm.
a man who has information they need lah. The turmoil and damage that it does not only to Kimmy but to Philip and Elizabeth's relationship makes it all the more interesting. His choice of not committing to the plan,
Yeah.
and Elizabeth's retort that he was never going to anyway, is a great scene for both characters. It shows her view of his softness in a cold light, while his side of the coin is that of compassion and kindness to a young woman over potentially ruining her life.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the many factors in Phillips's actions that kind of like rise up amongst the acts of good. In the end, like Philip is more compassionate
Yeah.
and good than Elizabeth is. Isa, like, do you have any thoughts about this Kimi subplot? Because I think it became quite a
Heavy.
the fan base had a lot of thoughts about this. What about you?
Yeah, so I think for Kimi in particular, like it was very clear, especially when Philip first initiates kind of contact, right? Like already that is like there were moments in time where the extras who were playing Kimi's friends were just kind of like, who is this weird, like much
Old
older
man.
guy? Why is he hanging
Yeah,
out with us? Other than then the weed comes out and then everything becomes okay. Um,
yeah,
but really like that kind of like raises eyebrows, and Philip's reluctance from the very beginning, right, to use Kimi as kind of like the
a
plant,
source.
yeah, as a source for
Yeah.
that. It I think it establishes very clearly um uh Philip's where Philip's places children within his moral sphere, right? And that to me, like the highlighting of that, the eventual compromise, and like honestly, like fucking Elizabeth Savage as like you just wanted to fuck her, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Retort. I was just like, wow, that is like some next level shit. They've gone through so many arguments, and both of them have never been kind to each other.
Mm,
When that kind of push comes to shove.
yeah.
Yeah, the Kimi thing, yeah, super uncomfortable. Even if like many years have passed and she has come of age, right? No matter how
Yep.
you look at it, right? Sure, you're using her as a source, but it's essentially grooming, you know,
Yep.
and
Yep.
something that I think, I think it shouldn't have needed for Stan to tell him about the courier's murder in front of their kid for Philip to make that decision, right?
mhm.
Yep.
And I think at that point in time, because Philip is so far removed from everything on the ground as far as being illegal is, right,
Mm,
he was coming to the point where he thought, like, you know what, I may actually be a good person, and that put him in his place.
mm,
And then like, because I remember reading like some fans had issues with like his sudden switch to the, oh, I'm going to go to Chicago, I'm going to help you out with that, and all that jazz. And I don't know if it's so much really if he wanted to help Oleg and Arkady, as much as it was like, you know what, I'm kind of fucked up myself.
yep.
I need to like kind of like get shit together again, right? But so much of that relationship and so much of the conversations that they have, Kimi has some of the most insightful conversations with Philip, right? Like,
Mm,
you are a
Yeah.
stuck man, those were one of the things that I so resonated with me a lot. I was just like, how does this kid know that, right?
yep.
Like, this is layer upon layer. At the point in time when he's with Kimi, that's 3 layers removed from who he actually is. But she sees into him, right, with such insight that is kind of scary. At which
Yep.
point, like, if I were Phil, I was just like, holy shit, like this girl knows I need to be careful, right? But it never quite gets there, lah. So unfortunate.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
glad he made the decision, lah, in the end.
Yeah, me too.
yeah. I mean, some last like kind of stray subplots that I kind of want to talk about before we delve into the finale, which I think was quite perfect. I think when Philip is forced to spy on Elizabeth,
Yeah.
Oh wow.
was a great subplot, and it
Was.
leads to further breakdown in communication between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her stress and tightness and betrayal, that he would leave that life behind factor into her becoming uneasy with filling in the whole picture for him, leading them to become, I guess, practically strangers like at one
Again,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it leads to her testing Paige, in a way testing Elizabeth. It's all very, very good stuff. I really like the subplot of Philip and the long-standing employee that he fired.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Starbucks.
that was that was really, really, yes. Elizabeth and the dying artist's wife, her accepting the
Oh.
painting from her was actually one of the best Elizabeth moments I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In the entire show. There was actually all like just this little things. Some of the best parts of overall
Yeah.
a moment made out of these great shows.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular character moments or scenes that stick out to you as your favorites? Let's begin with you, Isa.
Well, since we talked about male robot, right? Elizabeth's conversation with the lady in the factory, the male robot factory,
Yeah.
is one of my favorite scenes.
Yes, the old lady, right?
Yeah, the old lady.
Yep.
That was incredibly powerful.
Wow.
Right? And
Yeah.
and like having now in its entirety looking at that, like that was such an important moment when it happened in the context of what was going on in their lives at that point. That I really, really kind of like, that was really something. Philip and Elizabeth getting married
Yeah.
properly, I guess, was
Mhm.
also another like very key moment for me in terms of like where they were as characters,
Yep.
as well. And I mean, everything, this entire show is chock full of amazing moments, but
Mhm.
those two in particular were so evocative, I think is the best way to kind of explain of they were quiet moments that captured exactly where these characters were at the point in their lives. It was so powerful. I love those two.
What about you, Hadi?
I mean, sorry, but this would cut into a bit of the finale that we're going to talk about. But Stan
Sure.
finding out,
Yeah. Great moment.
Yeah.
like him, catching them red-handed in a parking lot, and that
Mhm.
that betrayal on his face, that sense of like utter sadness, and
Yeah.
Philip and him having to, and then him kind of acknowledging that Philip is his best friend, and Philip kind of acknowledging, yeah, you're my best friend too. Like it was so sad. It was like, these guys are best friends. It's like that, just different worlds, and it just like I there was no reconciliation anymore. Like it was so sad. Like because it was such a really well defined friendship over the seasons.
Yeah.
Like Philip was there for his divorce. Philip was there. He was there when things were going bad with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were there for each other. Like and I mean they only had one fight where when Philip stupidly went to go and talk to his ex-wife lah.
Mhm.
And then he found out and they had a little fight, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But after that, they were great friends, and everything. There was another moment before that where uh Stan asked like, "Is something wrong?" And
Oh, on the porch. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then like how Philip wanted to say, like you could tell that he wanted to tell Stan everything at that moment,
Yeah.
and like he just held back and decided to go with the whole business thing and that how his business is a failure and all that stuff.
Mm.
But like, oh my god, the relationship between these two guys was one of my favorite relationships. And
Yes.
that last scene where basically him begging for his life, like begging for him to let go because of the fate of the world. Like, god damn, that's so heavy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like everything in Stan, wants to like bring them in, like enough with this like shenanigans, enough with all this like clandestine bullshit, like you all are arrested, but then, Philip like using his that relationship he has with Stan and and arguing that look, the fate of the world really depends on this message going to Russia.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the end of it, yeah, that was my favorite scene lah. That last scene between
Yes.
the friends.
Oh gosh. Definitely, man. One of my favorite scenes I've already talked about. Philip screaming at Paige about the Bible
Yeah.
was. It's very memorable to me. I remember it like to this day. Like I haven't seen that scene in ages, but I remember it like quite vividly.
Yeah.
Another moment that I remember very vividly is what I would call, I think, the Americans' Mountain and the Viper moment, in the sense that it was the
Oh.
grossest moment of the
Mm.
show. It was Philip, Elizabeth, and their Pakistani asset Yusuf
Yeah.
breaking the
Oh,
bones of a
no.
new dead woman to fit her into a suitcase.
Oh my
Yeah.
Lord Almighty!
It was a really stomach churning
It
scene.
was.
Yeah.
Something that kind of like the Americans isn't a gore fest or something like that, but that was very gory, man.
Oh
Yep.
my Lord!
Yep.
I even think it put the Mountain and the Viper to shame. Like, it was very, very,
It was
very
so
gory.
graphic.
Yeah, there were a couple
Uh,
of scenes that were really kind of like that way. I think like Elizabeth choking the sick woman with the
yeah,
brush. That was
yeah,
and then the thing
But that
is
was
like
like mercy though.
yeah, for sure. But I mean, like the actual like visual image of what was going on was like really
Yeah.
quite something. I realized like as you were bringing that up, hits like it is
yep,
so strange to me that the fitting the woman into the suitcase felt so much more visceral than
yeah,
Philip using the axe to cut
Oh,
up
to cut off
um
the dead agent.
yeah the dead angel's
yeah.
body, and that felt strange to me, because there was something about like the cooperation of three people doing that was
Hmm.
like far more like ugh than
Him
where
just
they were
cutting off
at.
the head and
Yeah.
then hands.
Hmm.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to mention, but this one not as gory, but weirdly sexual,
Uh-huh.
was Philip pulling Elizabeth's tooth from season
Oh
three.
yeah.
Oh
Mm.
yeah, because she got injured by Gad and the black guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is essentially a scene of one spy pulling another spy's tooth out with a pair of pliers, which could be brutal and gory, but it was weirdly also a scene of
Yeah.
passion.
Hmm.
The eye contact, it felt like weirdly sensual and sexual and also
Yeah, that
painful.
was how it's framed, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I've never seen a sex scene like this.
Yeah, don't have.
But yeah, it was very well done, lah. And also because like there were so many, it felt like a weird microcosm of what the Americans is, lah, and what Phillips and Elizabeth relationship is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pain underneath all that passion, lah. Yeah, I mean, so good. Let's talk about the finale now, which I
Sure.
think, I think all FX shows have had perfect finales so far, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But the Americans finale really, really stands out to me, man. It was one of the best prestige drama endings that I've ever seen, and it found the Jennings on the run, setting up the pieces to flee the lives that they have held for several decades. It was in this episode where, in a parking garage, like Hadi mentioned, the Jennings, Paige included,
Hmm.
come face to face with Stan that knows everything. This moment has been a long time coming, full of 6 seasons of tension and almost heartbreak over a closeness that has hinged on lies and deceits and cruelty.
Mhm.
Stan, he has his gun trained on his best friend Philip, says as much, comparing his life to a joke
Mhm.
for what they have done to him. He calls them killers, to which Elizabeth scoffs, and they say that they never partook in such things.
Liar.
Something that all parties knew was a complete lie. Philip, in this instance, has the look of a person at their end, begging not for himself, but for the sake of his family, or Stan's decision, or lack of a decision, to allow them to pass him by and escape, completely dumbfounded over his entire life and career that has been created and destroyed. Along with the information that his new love could also possibly be a spy,
Yeah.
Stan will never be able to trust a single person for the remainder of his days.
Nope.
And it's kind of a cruel punishment
Is
for a man who's just kind of trying to do the best thing possible
Yeah.
most of the time, outside of the cheating on his wife part. The escape to Canada and eventually Russia culminates with Paige deciding to stick behind,
Yeah.
much to her parents' shock. with them watching her standing at the train station as the train passes by. It remains to this day one of the most memorable images that the Americans has ever crafted. Elizabeth's utter shock and devastation to this deserves. Carrie also deserves every award that she's eligible for
Yep.
Oh,
for
yeah.
this moment as a mother, knowing that she'll never see a child again in a single moment.
Yeah.
Uh, Henry too is lost to them, left at his school, only to be told by Stan at hockey practice what his parents truly are. In the plane ride across continents, the kind of touchstone of art and life comes to Elizabeth again in the form of a dream, kind of waking up surrounded by art. But all her focus falls on a picture of Paige and Henry, and then she wakes up suddenly. That final moment where Philip and Elizabeth finally in Russia are looking out over the city and wondering about choices that they've made in life
Yeah.
and that life has made for them is a wonderful end to the series. Elizabeth kind of considers a different path, but their minds turn back to their children again. The Americans and how they are no longer children, they're grown up. It's a painful reminder that the show had both children literally grow up in the midst of all these tensions and dangers, and they are now abandoned forever. Whatever fate awaits the pair in Russia is anyone's guess, especially after defying the center, and it's kind of left the mystery wisely. But their loss of family is an important factor, and while it is endlessly depressing, I think everyone ended up alive, so it's kind of a happy ending. But everyone kind of ended up dead inside too.
Yeah.
Everyone has has to bear the cost of what they've done, like even if they are alive. What do you think about the ending, Isa? Having been the most recent of us to watch this.
Oh man, I mean, like, what a pitch perfect ending. In terms of just making sure that all the characters got what they needed, right? Like,
Yeah.
even though, like, I'm just super curious what Paige is going to be up to, right? I'm super curious, like, what Henry's going to grow up into being, how Stan is going to, like, live with the consequences of his decision all the way at the end there at the garage, right? What struck me the most, I think, is the moment as Philip and Elizabeth are standing over that kind of like looking over the city, right? And they muse to themselves what life could have been like if they had not gone over to the
Yep.
States. And it's so strange to me, and a very kind of like aptly appropriate summation that even at that point, right, that their lives could have been so different. Elizabeth imagines that they might have met on a bus
Yeah.
somewhere, right? And that to me felt like such a great closing note for like the entirety of their personal relationship with each other, from like colleagues who are kind of like forced to play husband and wife to actually becoming
Yep.
husband and wife to becoming
Divorced.
divorced and then rivals and all of that kind of like summed up in this one amazing afterthought that Elizabeth muses at that moment, because there's so much to consider as they're kind of standing there, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just wondering, if it were to come back, where would they go from there? It at once answers so many questions and closes so many things, but leaves so much open for you to kind of like bring the story with you as your imagination would like. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually shockingly non-explosive. Like it wasn't like a big action sequence shootout kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was never what the Americans was. So I'm really really glad that the Americans ended in this way. What about you, Heidi? What do you think about the finale, the series finale?
It was a beautiful ribbon to this whole present.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
I mean, it succinctly,
Succinctly, yes.
succinctly.
that word, uh,
Yeah.
put an, put a closure. I mean, it gave closure to a lot of things that have been happening throughout the entire series. We're done. When the Page's story goes on, maybe mini series, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Fingers
That'll be
crossed.
fun. Um, it was a perfect finale, I feel, because right now the fog of war is cleared. Everybody knows what's happening. You know, like the FBI now has a clear picture of what was happening throughout this entire time. And how devious the KGB were throughout this entire period of time. The fact that Dennis came in with the two sketches of Philip and Elizabeth at the end, like finally, like perfect sketches of them.
Yeah.
You know, after all this time, it's been like shitty sketches, and finally, because of the father, the priest
Mm-hmm.
who saw them, you know, without all the disguises and all them, was able to sketch a proper, was able to give a proper description of who these two people were. Lah. And
Yeah.
Dennis just looking at it and showing Stan and saying that Stan, you know, like, I'm so sorry I doubted you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, too late. Too late. They're gone. Oh man. And then it was Stan saying that how he like, I don't know whether he really meant it, but then he said that if he sees Phillips again, he's gonna kill him.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't know whether he's saying that to throw off that he actually already encountered Philip,
Mm-hmm.
or was that a real, like, thing that he was gonna do, lah.
Yeah.
It might be both.
Yeah.
Then the other thing was that, there was this whole Renee thing. Like, there's a Renee
Mm-hmm.
scene of him and
Oh my
Stan and
God.
Renee, and then Stan just looking at Renee,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then you know what he was thinking in his head.
Yeah.
He's like, I have to do a background check immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the rest, like, Paige on that platform was so beautifully shot. I loved how, like, that panic on Elizabeth's face, as she stood up and started to run across the train.
Yeah.
Oh my god, and and finally, beautiful ending scene. I think Isa said most of it, lah.
Mm.
Beautifully done, and how they managed to get the message to Arkady, lah. That,
Yeah.
bro, there is a plot.
Yep.
Confirming the plot, and yeah, I do like the dream that she had on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
the one with Gregory.
Yes.
Like, that was her first love, like. I mean, she was always in love with Gregory, and
Yep.
Gregory's death and all that. I think was one of that pivotal moments that changed Elizabeth's outlook on this whole thing, lah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, to have that little note that, yeah, lah, she was in love with Gregory, lah, and she still is, lah. Misses him, lah.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, again,
Yes.
perfect ending. No complaints at all on how this series ended.
I'm even cool with the idea that Paige never really spells out why she leaves. She has so many reasons to stay behind that you don't need to know the exact reason, right?
Of course.
And also there's this idea that is losing both of their kids, being shamed by Stan, and returning to a country that never fully, that doesn't really, it feels like Elizabeth and Philip escaped justice or punishment.
Not really.
But is losing both of their kids a justified punishment? If you're looking at this as like a family story, then losing your children because of the decisions you made with your career, the lies you told them, the many ways you prioritize everything else in the world over them, feels largely in keeping with the ideas of the tale.
Yeah.
It could be worse for them, and honestly, it should be worse for Philip and Elizabeth. But the looks on their faces as they see Paige on the train platform, and the pain in their voices as they say goodbye to Henry, and the sheer exhaustion and self-loathing in Phillips's voice as he explains to Stan why he did what he did for as long as he did, makes it clear that they're far from getting off scot-free. They've ruined plenty of lives, and their own lives are part of that too.
They ruined their own lives. Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
I think one more thing also is that they actually came back to a country that they don't no longer recognize.
They spend their entire adult lives in America.
Yeah, and the country that they thought was the USSR, right at that moment when they were at the bridge, right? That was also the time period of Gorbachev. The USSR collapsing. And the new Russian Federation we know today, coming out from that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
like what have they done all this for?
Exactly, because at the end of the day, the USSR is still gone.
They lost, in the end.
Lost,
essentially. Yeah. I mean, what a tragic ending for both of them. Although, they actually truly deserve much worse for all the things that they've done.
The people they killed, a lot of people, like innocent people, like there was that botanist or something that they killed. Was trying to actually build.
Yeah, the bug guy.
The bug guy,
Yeah. Okay, so I think at the end of the show, I think Paige eventually joins the FBI. She'll be a great counterintelligence agent, seeing that she knows shit. I think that Philip doesn't last with Elizabeth.
I think they'll go separately.
Yeah.
I think Philip ends up back with Martha and her adopted daughter.
Oh my god, that's so interesting.
Are you of the
Uh,
opinion that Philip fell in love with Martha in the end?
I think he
He did. I mean,
Uh,
I mean, apart from the guilt that he felt for putting Martha into this situation, I
Yeah.
honestly think that there was real feelings there. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that they adopt Gabriel too, hopefully.
oh,
And yeah, and I think Elizabeth goes back into the KGB. I think she's still a spy to her age. She's perhaps the new Claudia right now.
oh my lord.
Probably.
Oh, by
Probably.
the way, we forgot about Philip's son,
Yeah,
who had this
Oh.
weird, like, very short story arc
Yeah.
where he traveled
Oh.
all the way from the USSR to America, and then
Gabriel
yeah,
said
you
no.
can go fuck off. You can go fuck back off.
Gabriel's like, sorry,
yeah,
man. Bye.
And
I
Philip
actually
didn't
quite
even know about
enjoyed
it.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
Where do you
Well,
think Henry
sweet
is
stuff.
at hits in your little kind of
Stan,
like
huh?
hit canon? Whoa.
I think Henry's a Stan. Yeah,
Yeah.
Stan's
So Stan
adopted him.
adopts
Lor.
him. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I always think that because of the way it ends for Henry, right? He eventually goes to look for his parents. Just to get some
Wow.
answers via, I don't know, either by joining the FBI or something along those lines. I don't know if Paige necessarily joins the FBI. She might go CIA. But yeah, I think that's totally
Which is
like
more forgiving
reasonable.
for treasonous people.
Yep, exactly, right. Because like she's beneficial, right? She's already been taught in some of the craft at least,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, I mean, a variety of
I
things could
like this fan
happen.
fiction. I like.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. I really just want to see, like, please, whoever the TV gods out there, please have a spin-off with just Paige and her adventures on her own, because like, I will watch the shit out of that.
Yeah, it's
Especially
actually kind of
Homeland lah.
weird. Yeah, yeah. It's actually kind of weird that you guys said that, because the whole thing with Carrie Russell obviously came to prominence with a show called Felicity,
Yeah.
Yep.
a college drama sitcom kind of
Yep,
thing
yep,
that
yep.
happened back in the late 90s. Famously created and written by J.J. Abrams, who wanted Carrie Russell to be the lead of Alias. She was unavailable, so they got Jennifer Garner instead.
Oh wow.
So yeah, Carrie Russell finally got to play a spy in a much better show than Alias ever was in this. But yeah, Carrie Russell was actually supposed to be the lead of Alias after Felicity, but she never got to be that spy.
It's okay.
She did it now. Speaking of a Garner, if you've watched Ozark and you realize how good Julia Garner is, this is
Yeah.
where she came from. This is where I first noticed Julia Garner.
Give me
Yeah.
She's been amazing since day one. She's the only thing about Ozark that is like worth watching.
It is.
And she's gone into movies now, so like good on
for
her. Yeah. Man, final thoughts about the Americans before we kind of wrap up the episode here. Let's begin with you, Hadi. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I recently rewatched the entire series.
Yep.
And I can say that I miss this kind of like. I mean, I think Better Call Saul is the only thing that right now that has that kind of quality.
Even that's ended.
Yeah, and that's just
Yeah.
ended. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna miss this kind of shows.
FX actually has a lot of these kind of shows, so you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look through them again.
Sure. Yeah. What about you, Isa? Final thoughts.
Oh man, I think any self-professed spy fan needs to watch The Americans.
100%.
It's one of those things that, I mean, you may not necessarily have a huge like of like the process and all of that, right? Like that kind of storytelling necessarily. But I feel if you don't, if you only watch like the big blockbuster hits, your Mission Impossibles, your Bourne Identities and such like that, you're only really getting half the story, right? And the half of the story that you're not getting, to me, after watching The Americans, is the more important half.
Yeah. I think for me, when you think about spy dramas, I think some in other spy dramas, like we're talking about 24, Homeland, or Bourne, or James Bond,
Yep.
or Mission Impossibles, the best moments are always when a mysterious conspiracy suddenly becomes clear and the audience sees the devious plotting laid bare in the third act.
Yeah.
It's the flip for the Americans. The best moments of the Americans are when whatever conspiracy the characters are working on reveals something about their inner lives.
Yeah.
It's not about the plot itself, but their reaction to the plot and what that tells us about ourselves and what that tells us about the characters.
Yep.
The most compelling scenes are not the ones that take place in safe houses or the Jennings's house, but it's more very quiet domestic drama type of scenes, which is kind of why I love The Americans. This was an FX prestige drama that may have flown under the radar. Almost every year that it was out, it missed out on the Emmys. It has won a Peabody Award and multiple television critic awards, and Margot Bantido has won for her guest starring roles. But that's just Margot. She wins every year for a million roles that she's been in.
Everything she does.
It was received with glowing, nearly rave reviews, and I think it deserved every one of them. So kudos to The Americans. You can check it out on Disney Plus right now. All 6 seasons available for streaming. Really great stuff. So to end this episode is what I like to call, what's making us happy. So let's begin with Hadi here.
Sure.
Have you seen, heard, listened, read anything that you like to shout out to our audience for your recommendations this August?
Ooh, that's a good one. What have I been watching right now that gives me a lot of happiness? This sounds weird as fuck, right?
Yep.
But I think Yellowstone has been quite interesting.
Oh,
The spin-off or the original?
Original.
The original show, okay.
I've been catching up on it. This rich rancher and his all these problems in Middle America.
Sure.
I don't know, something about it. I just like.
I agree with you, but do you feel like it plotting wise? I'm not saying settings or anything. Plotting wise, it just feels like Sons of Anarchy on.
It is, yes. That's why I
Yeah.
think I kind of like it.
yeah.
It reminds me of that because you have the gang of the cattle ranchers, right?
Yep.
And all these enemies outside of them, like it's the whole like tribalism thing that it's always fun to watch, I guess. Apart from that, I'm not watching much nowadays apart from all the wrestling and all the sci-fi stuff that we'll be covering in genre lah.
I guess we'll delve into like all the space of wrestling
exactly
genre.
so I don't have to mention that here.
What about you, Isa? Anything this August making you happy?
Oh man, shout out in particular because we're already going to talk about Sandman in about a week or so. Shout out to the special episode that came out. So if you're listening to this and you've watched Sandman and you don't already know there was a special episode 11 came out, please go and check that out. I thought that was excellent.
It was
just like a nice little teaser that just came out of nowhere that adds to the world of that. Outside of that, I think I've been more or less just like trying to catch up on the anime that I need to review for the next time I do Anime Corner. A lot of continuing anime, a lot of season 3s and season 4s from extremely popular anime have been back, like Overlord, for example. The Demon Lord is now a manager.
Overlord is back.
Yeah, Overlord is back. They're halfway through the season now, actually.
Oh, nice.
So like this season has been stocked full of like old favorites that are coming back that I personally have enjoyed watching before. So it's catching up with that and also making sure I do my due diligence with everything else for.
Sorry, I have one.
Oh yes.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I totally forgot. Woodstock 99.
Yeah, the clusterfuck that
Holy
was.
shit, that was crazy.
Yeah.
It made me I want to apologize to Jaru because Fire Festival not as fucked up as Woodstock 99, man.
Nope.
Are you only learning about Woodstock 99 because of this documentary?
Because I was very young, dude. I was never really privy to that
Oh,
kind.
you weren't in the new metal scene. Right, at that time.
Because Limp Bizkit and all, right, featured on Woodstock.
Yeah. I mean, Firefest was fine. Nobody got raped. Nobody got murdered.
This was like a riot and like fire and Lord of the Flies kind of situation, man.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting documentary that I thought I watched. Yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking of interesting documentaries, out right now at the projector is Fire of Love, which is a stunning documentary chronicling the marriage and careers of volcanologists Katya and Maurice Kraft. These two volcanologists, they dedicated their lives to roaming the planet and chasing eruptions everywhere in the world until they died in the 1991 volcanic eruption.
Oh, I know this. Yeah.
Yeah, as the film illustrates, this very unconventional couple leaves behind an indelible legacy of breathtaking footage that they took literally on the precipice of the mouth of active volcanoes. They
Yes.
have a treasure trove of scientific discovery, and their infectious passion for the natural world will really is really buoyant and will really get you into geology if you find that type of stuff boring. Yeah, go watch Fire of Love on the big screen. I highly
It's still on
recommend it.
projector, is it?
It's still at the projector, still available to watch. It was only released on the 11th for this month, so yeah, it's still pretty new.
Brilliant. Okay, I think I'm going to do that. Yeah.
Definitely. Season 2 of Sterling Harjo's dramedy Reservation Dogs is out now on FX and Disney Plus. Really love this dramedy about four Native American kids growing up and finding themselves on a reservation. Probably the closest thing to Better Things that I can find these days. They're very different shows, but the storytelling is quite similar. Another show that I want to recommend on HBO right now is Rap Shit, which is about two Gen Z friends. Are they in Gen Z 26? 26 is Gen Z,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, two Gen Z friends who form a rap group in Miami. This is a story of just a rap group being formed in Miami. But what's so interesting about the show is the way that it's filmed. 90% of the show, I've never seen a show capture social media and the use of phones as accurately as rap shit, because most of the show is shot through Instagram stories, Facebook stories, FaceTimes and Zooms and stuff like that. It really just goes to show how ubiquitous and how all consuming screen time is in our social dynamics these days. I think Rap Shit is the best part of that.
Okay.
It's created by Issa Rae, who created Insecure back in the day. So this is a really good show. Finally, I got to recommend season 3 of Never Have I Ever, which is back on Netflix.
Okay.
Machari Ramakrishnan remains, quite a charming gem as the lead in this Mindy Kaling directed, created sitcom about an Indian American teenager finding herself in suburban America. It's still a very good show, and one of the very few shows left on Netflix that is still worth watching.
Yeah.
Get off your ass, Netflix. There's really nothing else to watch, but Never Have I Ever is one of them. So
Nice.
check this stuff out. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about genre equality, as Hardy mentioned and Isa mentioned also. We'll be talking about The Sandman.
Yeah, man.
Me and Hardy will be talking about For All Mankind. We'll be talking about Prey.
Yes.
Actually, lots of good stuff coming up here.
Man, I love
Nope
Prey.
as well is out there as well. Yeah. Have you seen Nope, Hardy?
Not yet actually, but I'll be watching it this week.
Oh, sweet. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear what you think of it, lah. Yeah. It might be one of Jordan Peele's more divisive films.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Eager to talk about all of that coming this in less than a week actually. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you.
We'll see you next week. Tune in on the 1st. That's when we drop our genre equality show proper, our flagship show. And then we'll be back next month for another episode of Behold, where we'll talk about French cult classics all the way from the 50s to modern day. Me and Isa will be covering that one. So yeah.
I don't know anything about French what cult classics. Yeah, no, not my thing.
Yeah. But lots of different types of things are coming up on our genre equality channel. So a wide variety of stuff that we'll be covering in the future. So do tune in. Till next time though, this has been Hit
I'm
Zero.
Hardy.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye guys.
Bye.
Ciao.